You've shamed our family with your strange career, my grandmother declared from her throne-like chair at the head of the dining table, her voice carrying the weight of 92 years of absolute authority. A proper Korean woman marries well, raises children, brings honor to her ancestors. You run around foreign countries playing savior like some American missionary. The relatives murmured agreement, heads nodding like synchronized metronomes, while I bowed my head in practiced silence. But why did the unexpected phone call that interrupted this ritual humiliation cause my grandmother's teacup to shatter against the marble floor? Ms. Yoon, this is the protocol office at the South Korean Embassy in Washington, the voice said through my phone speaker. I'd accidentally answered on speakerphone while fumbling with my chopsticks. President Park wishes to personally present your International Humanitarian Medal at next month's ceremony. Your organization's $15 million impact on refugee education has been selected for special recognition. The dining room went absolutely silent. I'm sorry, I said carefully, aware of every family member's frozen expression. Could you repeat that? The President of the Republic of Korea wishes to honor you, Ms. Yoon. You've been chosen for our nation's highest civilian humanitarian award. We need to discuss the ceremony details and your speech requirements. My grandmother's teacup hit the floor, shattering into 100 pieces. Nobody moved to clean it up. I had been the family's greatest disappointment for 23 years. The Yoon family operated on tradition so rigid it might as well have been carved in stone. My grandfather had been a respected judge in Seoul. My father continued the legacy as a corporate attorney. My mother came from a family of doctors, 3 generations of surgeons who tended to Korean presidents and diplomats. Into this lineage of prestige and convention, I had committed the unforgivable sin of caring about strangers. It started in college, when I volunteered at a refugee resettlement center instead of pursuing the pre-med track my parents had selected. By graduation, I'd abandoned medical school applications entirely, choosing instead to work for a small nonprofit helping displaced families navigate the American immigration system. This is temporary, my mother had assured relatives. She's going through a phase. The phase lasted 2 decades. I founded Horizon Bridge when I was 28, an organization focused on educational access for refugee children. We started with a single classroom in a converted warehouse and a budget of $47,000 scraped together from grants and donations. Today, we operated in 14 countries, had educated over 50,000 children, and managed an annual budget of $15 million. My family knew none of this. The disconnect was deliberate. Every family gathering, every holiday meal, every birthday celebration became an opportunity for collective disappointment. My grandmother led the chorus, but everyone participated, aunts clicking tongues, uncles shaking heads, cousins exchanging meaningful glances. Still doing charity work, they'd ask, making the words sound like an admission of failure. Still unmarried at 43, as if my relationship status was the family's wound to tend. Still traveling to dangerous places, while scrolling through their phones, barely listening to my answers. I'd learned early that explaining my work was futile. They didn't want to understand, they wanted me to conform. So I stopped explaining, stopped defending, gave vague answers and changed subjects and waited for gatherings to end so I could return to work that actually mattered. The embassy call had shattered that careful separation. My grandmother recovered first. What is this? She demanded. Some kind of joke? It's not a joke, grandmother. I was still holding the phone, the embassy official waiting patiently on the line. I need to take this call. I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, and confirmed the details with the protocol office. The ceremony would be held at the Kennedy Center. President Park was making a special trip during her U.S. visit. The medal was Korea's highest civilian honor for humanitarian achievement. We've been trying to reach you for 3 weeks, the official said. Your organization's work with Syrian and Afghan refugee children has attracted significant attention. The president specifically requested that you be recognized. I'm honored. Truly. We'll send the formal details by courier. Congratulations, Ms. Yoon. You've made Korea proud. I hung up and stood in the hallway, trying to process what had just happened. 23 years of family dismissal. And now the president of Korea wanted to personally thank me. I returned to a dining room in chaos. My mother had pulled out her phone, frantically searching for information. My father sat rigid, expression unreadable. Cousins whispered urgently. Aunts and uncles had abandoned any pretense of casual conversation. Only my grandmother remained still, watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. What is Horizon Bridge? My mother demanded. I searched. There are articles. News stories. This organization has been operating for 15 years. Yes. You founded it? Yes. It has raised over $100 million since inception? Educated 50,000 children? Yes. Why didn't you tell us? I sat down slowly, carefully, the weight of 2 decades of silence pressing against my chest. Would you have listened? The question hung in the air. Every time I tried to share my work, someone interrupted. Someone changed the subject. Someone reminded me that I should have been a doctor, should have married, should have done anything except what I chose. I looked around the table at faces I'd known my entire life, faces that had never once asked about my actual life. You didn't want to know about Horizon Bridge. You wanted me to be someone else entirely. My aunt spoke up defensively. We were concerned. Your lifestyle seemed unstable. My lifestyle has provided education to children who would otherwise have none. My unstable career has been featured in the New York Times, CNN, and apparently caught the attention of our nation's president. I shook my head. But you never knew any of that because you never asked. My grandmother finally spoke. You let us believe you were failing. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. There's a difference. For 23 years? For 23 years, you told me I was a shame to this family. Every gathering, every phone call, every holiday, shame, shame, shame. I met her eyes directly, something I'd rarely done in 4 decades of life. I didn't hide my success to punish you. I hid it because your opinion stopped mattering. I built something I was proud of, something that helped real people, and I didn't need your approval to know it was worthwhile. But the president sees what you refuse to see. That's not my problem. It's yours. The silence stretched. My grandmother, this woman who had dominated every family gathering for as long as I could remember, seemed suddenly smaller. Not diminished exactly, but uncertain. A state I'd never witnessed in her before. I would like to understand, she said finally. What you've built. What this medal represents. Would you? Or would you like to find new reasons why it doesn't count? She flinched. Actually flinched, this iron matriarch who had never shown vulnerability in my presence. I deserve that, she admitted. But I am asking genuinely. Help me understand. I talked for 3 hours. I told them about the refugee camp in Jordan where I first understood my calling, children sitting in dust, desperate to learn, their futures erased by wars they hadn't started. I told them about the converted warehouse in Queens where Horizon Bridge began, teaching English to traumatized families who'd lost everything. I told them about the expansion, Uganda, Lebanon, Bangladesh, Greece, classrooms emerging in places the world had forgotten. I showed them photos. Thousands of children in Horizon Bridge uniforms, grinning at cameras, holding certificates, graduating into futures they'd never dared imagine. I showed them letters. Testimonials from students who'd become doctors, engineers, teachers themselves. A Syrian girl who'd arrived speaking no English was now a pediatric surgeon in Chicago. An Afghan boy who'd learned to read in our Kabul program had just been accepted to MIT. This is what you've been doing, my mother whispered, scrolling through the photos. All this time? All this time? While you were asking when I'd find a husband and settle down. Why didn't you make us understand? I tried. For years, I tried. But you didn't want to understand, you wanted me to quit. Eventually, I stopped trying and just did the work. My father spoke for the first time since the call. The $15 million they mentioned. Your annual budget? Yes. You raise that every year? We have a development team now, but I personally raised most of it for the first decade. Foundation grants, individual donors, corporate partnerships. I shrugged. Fundraising isn't glamorous, but it's necessary. $15 million. He shook his head slowly. I had no idea you were capable, you had no idea because you never considered the possibility. In your mind, I was the family failure. That narrative was more important than actually knowing your daughter. The ceremony was held 6 weeks later. I debated whether to invite my family. They'd spent 2 decades dismissing my work, did they deserve to witness its recognition? In the end, I sent invitations. Not because they'd earned the privilege, but because I'd spent too many years hiding. If the president of Korea was acknowledging my work publicly, my family could witness it too. They all came. My grandmother, 92 years old, flew from Los Angeles to Washington in her finest hanbok. My parents sat in the front row. Aunts, uncles, cousins filled an entire section of the Kennedy Center's concert hall. The ceremony was overwhelming. President Park spoke about Korea's responsibility to the global community, about citizens who represented the nation's highest values abroad. She spoke about Horizon Bridge specifically, the innovative curriculum, the trauma-informed approach, the remarkable outcomes. Ms. Yoon Ji-young has dedicated her life to children the world has forgotten, the president said. In doing so, she has brought immeasurable honor to Korea and to the principle that education is the most powerful force for human dignity. She placed the medal around my neck, heavy gold, inscribed with the national seal. Thank you, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. For seeing value in work that isn't always visible. The reception afterward was surreal. Diplomats and dignitaries approached to shake my hand. Journalists requested interviews. The Korean American community leaders who'd attended wanted to discuss partnerships and collaborations. And through it all, my family watched. My grandmother approached during a quiet moment between conversations. "I have something to say." I braced myself. Even after the ceremony, I half expected criticism. I was wrong. The words came out stiff, unpracticed. "For 23 years, I was wrong about you. About your work. About what brings honor to a family." "Grandmother, let me finish." She held up a weathered hand. "In my generation, we believed honor came from tradition. From following paths our ancestors walked. But watching you tonight, seeing what you've built, the lives you've changed, I understand something I was too proud to see before." "What's that?" "That honor isn't about obedience. It's about impact. About using your life to make the world better." She reached out and touched the medal hanging against my chest. "You have brought more honor to the Yoon family than any of us." I was too blind to recognize it. "I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say. In 43 years, I'd never heard my grandmother apologize for anything. "That means more than you know," I finally managed. "I would like to visit," she said. "Your organization. One of your schools. Before I die, I want to see what my granddaughter has built." "I'd like that too." 3 months later, my grandmother visited our flagship program in Queens. She was 92, frail, requiring a wheelchair for the tour. But her eyes were sharp as ever, taking in every detail: the classrooms, the library, the computer lab, the art room where refugee children painted murals of the homes they'd lost and the futures they dared to imagine. "How many children come here?" she asked. "This center serves about 300. But we have programs in 14 countries now." "All from that warehouse you started in?" "All from a single idea, that every child deserves to learn, regardless of where they were born or what wars destroyed their homes." She was quiet for a long moment, watching a group of Syrian children working on math problems with their teacher. "Your grandfather would have understood this," she said finally. "He was a judge, but he cared about justice for everyone, not just Koreans, not just the wealthy. He would have seen the honor in what you've done." "I wish I'd known him." "He knew you. You were born 2 months before he died. He held you once and said," she paused, composing herself. "He said you had determined eyes. That you would do something important." I hadn't known that. In all my years of family disappointment, no one had ever shared that story. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I forgot. Because I let my own expectations obscure what he saw." She reached for my hand. "I'm sorry, Ji-young. For all the years I made you feel small. You were never small. I was just too limited to see your size." The relationship with my family has transformed. Not overnight, decades of distance don't dissolve instantly. But there's genuine interest now where there was only criticism before. My mother calls to ask about programs, not to remind me of my failures. My father has connected me with corporate donors through his legal network. Even my cousins have started volunteering with refugee resettlement organizations in their own cities. My grandmother died 8 months after visiting the Queen's Center. At her funeral, the family asked me to speak. "My grandmother was a woman of tradition," I said to the gathered mourners. "For most of my life, I believed that tradition and I were enemies, that her values and my choices could never coexist. But in her final year, she taught me something I'll never forget." I paused, looking at the photo of her displayed beside the altar. "She taught me that growth doesn't have an expiration date. That understanding can arrive late and still matter. That honor isn't about following prescribed paths, it's about having the courage to recognize when you've been wrong." My grandmother spent decades believing I had shamed our family. In the end, she saw the truth, that I had honored it in ways she couldn't initially recognize. Her ability to change, at 92 years old, was itself an act of honor. I hope I have her courage when I'm her age. The courage to see clearly, even when it means admitting I was blind. Horizon Bridge continues to grow. We've expanded to 23 countries now. Our alumni number over 75,000, teachers, doctors, engineers, artists, parents raising children in stability they never knew themselves. The presidential medal hangs in my office, not as a trophy but as a reminder that validation can come from unexpected places. But the recognition that matters most came from a 92-year-old woman in a wheelchair, touring a converted warehouse in Queens, finally seeing what she'd been too proud to notice for 23 years. "You have brought more honor to the Yoon family than any of us." Those words healed something I hadn't known was broken. My daughter asks me sometimes about those years of family disapproval. She's 14 now, already showing signs of the stubborn independence that got me labeled the family shame. She wants to understand why I stayed silent, why I didn't fight back, why I let them believe I was failing. Because fighting wasn't the point, I tell her. Building something meaningful was the point. Their approval wasn't necessary for my work to matter. But didn't it hurt? All those years? Sometimes. But hurt isn't fatal, and their opinion wasn't the measure of my life. The children we've educated, they're the measure. The futures we've changed, that's the measure. What your grandmother thought at any given family dinner? That was noise. What about now? Now that they know? Now we have honest relationships for the first time. That's better. But I didn't need their validation to be proud of what I've built. And neither will you, whatever you choose to build. She thinks about this, my serious daughter with her determined eyes, the same eyes, I now know, that my grandfather saw in me. I want to work with you someday, she says. At Horizon Bridge. When I'm old enough. The door's always open. And if the family doesn't approve? I smile. Then you do it anyway. And maybe, 23 years later, they finally see what you've built. Or maybe they don't. Either way, the work matters. The work always matters more than the approval. She called me a shame because my path wasn't hers. She measured honor by traditions I couldn't follow. But while she was counting my failures, I was building classrooms in refugee camps, teaching hope to children who'd been taught only fear. The president saw it first. The medal made it visible. But the real victory wasn't recognition, it was the 92-year-old woman who finally admitted she'd been wrong. Honor isn't about following prescribed paths. It's about having the courage to forge new ones, even when the people who should support you can only see shame. They called me a disappointment for 23 years. Now they call me for advice. The work didn't change. Only their ability to see it did.